The jar slipped from Celine's fingers and shattered against the stone floor. Glass and crushed lavender scattered like broken dreams across the healing cottage, and Rhiannon knew the way prey always knows that this was just the beginning. Clumsy Omega, Celine purred, her ice blue eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Now you'll have to explain to Margaret why you're wasting the pack's resources. 3 more days. The Alpha King would arrive in 3 more days, and Rhiannon still couldn't shift. 21 years old, 3 years past her first attempt, and her wolf remained locked away behind walls of pain and failure that she couldn't break through. Sometimes the wolves who howl the loudest about your worthlessness are the ones who fear what you might become if you ever discovered your true power. But Rhiannon didn't know that yet. All she knew was the sharp sting of glass cutting her palm, the laughter of her tormentors echoing down the corridor, and the brutal certainty that she was exactly what they called her: broken, defective, worthless. The morning mist clung to the Ashwood Pack grounds like a burial shroud, and Rhiannon wondered if today would finally be the day they broke her completely. Not with claws or fangs that would be too merciful for an Omega who couldn't shift properly. No, they preferred the slow death of 1,000 humiliations, each small cruelty designed to remind her that she was nothing more than a mistake the moon goddess had cursed them with. She knelt among the shards, her trembling hands gathering broken pieces, watching bright red blood well against pale skin. Even her blood felt wrong. Too thin, too bright, lacking the darker richness of a proper wolf's vitality. Child. The voice was soft but made Rhiannon jump. She looked up to find her grandmother standing in the doorway. Morgan was 87 years old, though she claimed to have stopped counting decades ago. She moved slowly, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick, her silver hair braided down her back. The pack treated her with distant respect, the way one might honor a relic from a forgotten time. Harmless, feeble, a remnant of better days. But when Morgan looked at Rhiannon, her dark eyes held something the girl couldn't name, something that felt like recognition, like hope. "Let me see," Morgan said, taking Rhiannon's bleeding hand in weathered fingers. She produced a clean cloth from her pocket. She always seemed to have exactly what was needed, and wrapped the wound with practiced efficiency. "It wasn't my fault," Rhiannon began, but her grandmother silenced her with a look. "Fault is a luxury we cannot afford." Morgan's voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it carried weight. "Come to my cottage tonight after sundown. There's something you need to know." "Grandmother, I have evening duties." "Tonight, Rhiannon." Morgan's grip tightened just slightly. "What I have to tell you cannot wait any longer." Before Rhiannon could respond, the old woman was gone, moving with surprising grace despite her years disappearing into the morning mist like a ghost. Rhiannon stood there, her bandaged hand throbbing in time with her heartbeat, wondering what secret could possibly matter more than the simple, brutal truth that she was broken and always would be. The memory of her 18th birthday still burned. The night that should have brought her wolf had instead brought only scorching pain and failure. While others her age ran freely under the full moon, Rhiannon remained trapped between forms neither fully human nor completely wolf. The partial shift had lasted only seconds before her body rejected it, bones cracking and reforming, wrong agony lancing through every nerve until she'd collapsed screaming. Her father had looked away. The pack healer had called it a malformation, and the whispers had begun. 3 years of those whispers. 3 years of working in the healing cottage, one of the few places she was allowed, grinding herbs, preparing poultices, making herself as small and invisible as possible. She'd learned that invisibility was a kind of survival. Through the frosted window, she could see other young wolves running freely through the forest, their forms magnificent and proud. Perfect creatures of muscle and moonlight, exactly as wolves were meant to be. She looked down at her trembling hands. Human hands that should have transformed years ago. Broken hands that betrayed her every time she tried. The day passed in its usual rhythm of small humiliations. Healer Margaret said nothing about the broken jar, but her disappointed silence spoke volumes. Rhiannon scrubbed floors, changed bandages, swallowed every spark of anger or pain or defiance. But as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood, Rhiannon made her way to her grandmother's cottage at the edge of the pack grounds. It was a small structure half hidden by ancient oak trees separate from the main compound. The pack had given it to Morgan years ago, a gesture that seemed kind until you understood it was really exile. Keep the old woman at a distance, out of sight, out of mind. Rhiannon had spent countless hours here as a child, listening to her grandmother's stories about the old days, about wolves who could run on moonbeams and speak to the goddess herself. Fairy tales her father had called them. Delusions of a mind growing soft with age. But Rhiannon had always loved the stories. They made her feel less alone. She knocked softly before entering. The cottage was warm firelight dancing across walls lined with shelves of books and dried herbs. Morgan sat in her chair by the hearth, but something about her posture was different. Straighter, more alert. "Close the door," the old woman said. "Lock it." Rhiannon obeyed, her pulse quickening. "Grandmother, what's wrong?" Morgan stood, and the transformation was startling. Gone was the frail, trembling old woman who shuffled through the packed grounds. The person who faced Rhiannon now moved with fluid grace, her dark eyes sharp and clear as mountain water. "Nothing is wrong, child. Or rather, everything has been wrong, but it's about to change." She moved to a carved wooden chest in the corner and withdrew something wrapped in midnight blue silk. "Sit down. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every word is true." Rhiannon sank into a chair, her mind reeling. "I don't understand." "Your mother," Morgan began, unwrapping the silk to reveal a small crystal vial filled with silvery liquid, "did not die of illness." The words hit like a physical blow. Freya had been gone for 6 years now. 6 years since Rhiannon had watched her mother waste away, growing weaker and thinner with each passing month. The healers had said it was a sickness, with no name, a slow fade that no medicine could cure. The pack said, "The pack knows nothing." Morgan's voice was gentle but firm. "Freya died to save you, Rhiannon. Every day she lived past the moment you were born, she was sacrificing herself. Piece by piece, breath by breath." Tears burned Rhiannon's eyes. "I don't understand." Morgan knelt before her granddaughter, taking both of Rhiannon's hands in hers. "You are not defective. You are not broken. Your wolf is not malformed." She paused, making sure Rhiannon was listening. "Your wolf is bound, suppressed, hidden behind a barrier so powerful that it's taken every ounce of your strength just to survive it. But why would anyone? Because you are moon-blessed." The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Rhiannon stared at her grandmother, waiting for the punchline, for the moment when this would make sense. It didn't come. "Moon-blessed are a myth," Rhiannon whispered, "a story from the old days." "I am 87 years old," Morgan said softly. "I was 22 when the Council of Alphas voted to exterminate every moon-blessed wolf they could find. I was 22 when I watched them murder my mother, my sisters, my cousins. I was 22 when I learned to hide what I was, to suppress my wolf so completely that no one would ever suspect." Rhiannon's breath caught. "You're moon-blessed." "I was. I buried that part of myself so deep that it might as well be dead." Morgan's eyes grew distant. "But your mother, my beautiful stillborn Freya, she was born with the gift in her blood. I taught her to hide it just as I had hidden mine. She fell in love with your father, a good man, but not a strong wolf. Perfect camouflage. We thought we were safe. What happened? You happened." Morgan smiled, but it was tinged with sorrow. "The moment you were conceived, your mother knew. She could feel your power even in the womb. Power that would be impossible to hide once you were born, once you shifted for the first time." The vial gleamed in the firelight, liquid silver swirling like captured moonlight. "Freya had a choice," Morgan continued. "Let you be born and watch the council find you, torture you for information, and kill you before your first birthday. Or," she held up the vial, "bind your wolf, lock it away so completely that no one would ever know what you truly were. But a binding that strong requires a sacrifice." Rhiannon could barely breathe. Her life. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious, too suspicious. No, she chose a slower path. From the moment you were born, Freya poured her life force into the binding. Every day, a little more of her essence went into the spell. Every month, she grew a little weaker. 6 years, Rhiannon. She gave herself 6 years to ensure the binding would be permanent, unbreakable by any normal means. The tears came freely now. Rhiannon remembered those final months, her mother's skeletal frame, the way Freya would smile even as the light faded from her eyes. She'd thought her mother was sick. She'd thought it was random, cruel, meaningless. But it had been love. Sacrificial, devastating love. "The pack said she died of shame," Rhiannon choked out. "They said she knew I would be defective, and it killed Hisherbar." "The pack," Morgan said with quiet fury, "knows nothing of sacrifice, nothing of a mother's love." She pressed the vial into Rhiannon's hands. "Your mother's final gift. Drink this tonight before you sleep. It won't break the binding that requires something even I don't fully understand, but it will ease the pressure, the pain. Your wolf has been fighting against its cage for 3 years. This will help it rest." Rhiannon stared at the vial, her mind spinning. "If all of this is true, if I really am moon-blessed, what does that mean?" It means, Morgan said, standing with effort, her facade of frailty sliding back into place, that you are more powerful than every wolf in this pack combined. It means your mother died to give you a chance at life that the council would have stolen. And it means a howl split the evening air. Not a normal patrol call, but something urgent, commanding. Both women froze. That's the Alpha signal, Rhiannon whispered. Emergency gathering. Morgan's face had gone pale. He's here. The Alpha King. I thought we'd have more time. What? How do you know? I can feel him. The old woman's hands trembled. Moon-blessed can sense each other even through suppression. And there's only one wolf powerful enough to make me feel it from this distance. She gripped Rhiannon's shoulders with surprising strength. Listen to me carefully. When you see him, when he looks at you, your wolf is going to react. The binding will crack. You must not panic. Do you understand? No matter what you feel, no matter what happens, you must hold on. Grandmother, I'm scared. Good. Fear will keep you sharp. Morgan released her. Go. They'll expect you at the gathering, but Rhiannon, she caught her granddaughter's hand one last time. Remember that destiny doesn't make mistakes. It only creates mysteries waiting to be solved. The pack gathered in the main hall, a massive structure of wood and stone that could hold every wolf in Ashwood. Rhiannon slipped in through the side entrance, keeping to the shadows as always. The hall thrummed with nervous energy, hundreds of wolves in both human and animal form, creating a cacophony of whispers and growls. At the front, her father stood with the other senior wolves. Aldrich Ashwood looked older than his 48 years. His dark hair shot through with silver. His shoulders perpetually hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight. He never looked at Rhiannon anymore. Hadn't met her eyes directly in 6 years. She understood now. He'd known what Freya was doing, known the cost, and been powerless to stop it. The knowledge must have been unbearable. Silence! Pack Alpha Thaddeus's voice boomed across the hall. He was a massive wolf scarred from countless battles, his authority absolute. The Alpha King approaches. All unmated wolves will form ranks. Alphas and betas in front, deltas and gammas in the middle. He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd until they landed on Rhiannon. Omegas in the back. Rhiannon took her place at the very rear of the hall, the only Omega present. Most families who produced Omegas sent them to other packs as part of alliance agreements. Only she remained too defective to even be traded away. The great oak doors swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Power rolled in like a physical force pressing against Rhiannon's skin, making her wolf, her suppressed, caged, impossible wolf, or suddenly wake up and scream. Mine. The word echoed in her mind with such force that she stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Her wolf, silent and still for 3 years, was suddenly thrashing against its binding with violence that stole her breath. Mine. 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 Kael Darkmoon entered the hall, and the world shifted. He was taller than any wolf she'd seen, moving with the lethal precision that made every other person in the room look clumsy by comparison. His hair was black as a moonless night, his skin sun-kissed, despite the Northern Territory's eternal clouds. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart, silver like mercury, ancient and knowing, holding secrets that shouldn't exist in someone who looked barely past 30. Those eyes swept across the gathered wolves with dismissive efficiency, cataloging and dismissing, searching for something. They stopped on her. Everything narrowed to that singular moment of connection. Rhiannon felt as if someone had reached into her chest and grabbed her heart, squeezing until she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stand there as the Alpha King's expression shifted from boredom to something she couldn't name. He took a step toward her, then another. Your Majesty, Alpha Thaddeus bowed low. Welcome to Ashwood. We are honored by your presence. May I present our unmated wolves for your consideration? Kael didn't acknowledge him. His eyes hadn't left Rhiannon. Who is that? His voice was deeper than thunder, soft as silk, and it slithered down her spine like a caress. Who, your Majesty? Thaddeus followed his gaze and his face paled. Oh, that is no one of consequence. An Omega with a malformed wolf. We've arranged our strongest females in the front. Her name. It wasn't a request. Aldrich stepped forward, panic clear in his voice. Rhiannon, your Majesty, my daughter, but I assure you she is not suitable. Kael moved through the crowd like water wolves parting before him without conscious thought. Each step brought him closer, and with each step Rhiannon's wolf grew more frantic. Run, her rational mind screamed. Run before he sees what you really are. But she couldn't move, couldn't even lower her gaze as protocol demanded. She could only watch as death incarnate approached her with eyes that burned silver fire. He stopped mere inches away, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the scent of pine and winter storms that clung to him. This close she could see the fine scars that decorated his neck, his hands evidence of battles won, challenges conquered. "Your wolf," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. "I can feel it. Fighting, raging, desperate to be free." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I don't have a wolf, not properly." "Liar." But there was no anger in it, only certainty. "You have a wolf, it's just caged." "Your Majesty," Thaddeus tried again. "Surely one of our stronger wolves would better suit." Kael moved so fast that Rhiannon barely saw it. One moment the Alpha was speaking. The next he was on his knees, Kael's hand around his throat. "Did I ask for your opinion?" Kael's voice had gone deadly soft. Around them, the Ashwood wolves growled instinct, demanding they protect their Alpha, but none dared move against the king. "Please," Rhiannon heard herself say, "please don't hurt him." Kael turned those mercury eyes back to her, something flickering in their depths. Slowly he released Thaddeus, who gasped and stumbled backward. "You beg for a man who calls you defective?" the king asked, tilting his head with predatory interest. "He's my Alpha." "He's a fool." Kael stepped closer to her, and Rhiannon's back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to retreat. "I require a private audience with the Omega." Gasps echoed through the hall. Such a request was practically a declaration of intent, a sign of serious interest. "Your Majesty," Aldrich's voice cracked, "surely one of our stronger wolves would better suit." "Question me again," Kael said conversationally, "and I'll raise this entire territory to ash and bone. The Omega. A private room. Now." The Blue Moon Chamber was reserved for visiting Alphas, its walls lined with silver and moonstone that caught the light like captured stars. Rhiannon had only been inside once years ago when her mother was alive and had snuck her in to show her the beautiful murals depicting ancient wolf legends. Now she stood in that same room with the most dangerous wolf in the Northern Territories, and her grandmother's potion was the only thing keeping her from shifting into her grotesque form from sheer terror. Kael closed the door behind them with deliberate slowness, the soft click of the latch somehow more ominous than if he'd slammed it. Rhiannon pressed herself against the far wall, pulse racing. "You're afraid of me." He observed it clinically, not moving from the door. "Everyone is afraid of you." To her shock, his lips curved into something that might have been amusement. "True, but your fear is different." He tilted his head, studying her like a particularly fascinating puzzle. "You're not afraid I'll kill you. You're afraid I'll see you." "I don't know what you mean." "Liar." He moved then, not toward her, but to the window, gazing out at the rising moon. "Do you know why I'm really here, Rhiannon?" The sound of her name in his voice made her wolf purr. Actually, purr something it had never done before. "The official story is territorial inspection," she replied carefully. "But my grandmother says you're looking for something lost." He turned sharply, his silver eyes narrowing. "Your grandmother. Morrigan, isn't it, still alive after all these years?" "You know her." "I know of her." He was studying her again, that intense gaze that seemed to peel back layers of skin and bone to examine her very soul. "She was friends with my grandmother before the Great Division. Tell me, does she still brew those interesting potions?" Rhiannon's hand flew to her stomach where the vial's contents sat. "I don't—" "You reek of moon mint and silver sage," he interrupted. "A suppression draft, if I had to guess, strong enough to keep even the most violent wolf subdued." He moved closer, and Rhiannon's back hit the wall. "The question is, why would you need such a thing unless—" His nostrils flared and something shifted in his expression. "Unless your wolf isn't malformed at all. It's just fighting something." "You're wrong." The words came out as barely a whisper. "My wolf is broken. Everyone knows. Everyone knows what they've been told." He was close enough now that she could see flecks of gold in his silver eyes like stars scattered across night. "But I've learned never to trust what everyone knows." He lifted his hand and Rhiannon flinched, expecting pain. Instead, his fingers ghosted across her cheek, barely a whisper of touch that sent electricity racing through her veins. "May I?" he asked, and before she could ask what he meant, his hand was at her throat. Not threatening his touch was feather-light fingers tracing the pulse point where her neck met her shoulder. The traditional marking spot, the place where a mate would bite. Ice, lightning, fire. The sensations crashed through her simultaneously, and her wolf surged against the potion's barriers with unprecedented violence. The binding that had held for 21 years cracked like a glacier in spring, and Rhiannon gasped, her spine arching as every nerve ending came alive at once. Kael jerked back, as if burned, his eyes wide with something that looked impossibly like shock. Impossible, he breathed. What? Rhiannon's voice cracked. What did you do? Nothing. I did nothing. He was backing away now, running a hand through his hair in an oddly human gesture of agitation. You can't be. A knock at the door interrupted whatever revelation he was having. Your Majesty, it was Magnus Kael's beta. The Alpha requests your presence for the formal dinner. Kael took a moment to compose himself, visibly struggling. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to its earlier cold authority. I'll attend shortly. Shall I escort the Omega back to? The Omega stays. Silence from the other side of the door, then retreating footsteps. Kael stood in the center of the room, his back to her, tension radiating from every line of his body. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, younger somehow, more vulnerable. Do you believe in fate, Rhiannon? I believe in curses, she replied honestly. I believe the universe makes mistakes. He laughed, but it was a sound devoid of joy. Yes, it does. He turned back to her, and the vulnerability was gone, replaced by that predatory intensity. Your wolf, when did you first try to shift? My 18th birthday, but it went wrong. I couldn't complete the transformation. The healer said my wolf was too weak, malformed. I've never successfully shifted. And the pain, excruciating. She wrapped her arms around herself, remembering, like being torn apart from the inside. He moved toward her again, but this time his approach was different. Careful, almost hesitant. What if I told you that wasn't weakness? What if I told you your wolf wasn't malformed, but suppressed by a binding so powerful it's been slowly killing you for 3 years? That's impossible. Who would? She stopped, her mind racing. No, my parents would never. Perhaps not intentionally. He was close again, but this time she didn't feel threatened. If anything, her wolf was practically trying to crawl out of her skin to get closer to him. Tell me about your mother. She died when I was 15, 3 years before my first shift attempt. How? Illness. She got weaker and weaker until... Rhiannon trailed off, remembering those final days. How her mother had gripped her hand, whispering words in the old tongue that Rhiannon couldn't understand. How she'd made Morrigan promise something, their voices too low for anyone else to hear. Not illness, Kael said quietly. Sacrifice. Before Rhiannon could demand an explanation, he was at the door. You'll attend the dinner tonight. I'm not allowed at formal dinners. Omegas eat in the kitchen. You'll sit beside me. That's the place of honor for my chosen, he finished, and the words hung between them like a physical thing. Wear something other than these rags. You deserve better. He left before she could respond, the door closing with finality behind him. Rhiannon sank to the floor, her legs no longer able to support her. Her wolf was going insane, throwing itself against the barriers of the potion with increasing desperation. And underneath the chaos, a single word kept repeating in her mind in a voice that wasn't quite her own. Mate, mate, mate. No, it was impossible. Fated mates were rare, growing rarer with each generation. And an Alpha King fated to a broken Omega. The universe couldn't be that cruel, that kind, that strange. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. The door opened to reveal Morrigan carrying a dress of deep emerald silk that shimmered like forest shadows. I had a feeling you'd need this, her grandmother said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Your mother wore it to her first formal dinner with your father. She'd want you to have it. Rhiannon stood on shaking legs. Grandmother, what's happening to me? Morrigan set down the dress and took both of Rhiannon's hands in hers. What I should have told you years ago. What your mother made me swear to keep secret until the right moment. She took a breath. The Alpha King Kael Darkmoon, he's been searching for 5 years. Every territory he conquered, every pack he visited, he was looking for signs of moon-blessed survival. Why? Because his grandmother was moon-blessed, one of the last to escape the purge. She made him promise to find any survivors to protect them. Morrigan's eyes grew bright. And because, my dear child, he is your fated mate. The room spun. Rhiannon gripped her grandmother's hands like they were the only solid thing in the universe. His grandmother told him he would know his mate by a simple sign. When he touched her, her suppressed wolf would wake. No other wolf could break through a moon-blessed binding except a true mate blessed by the goddess herself. But I'm not moon-blessed. I can't be. I'm just broken, Morrigan smiled sadly. No, my darling girl, you are what your mother and I have been hiding for 21 years. You are the last known moon-blessed, born in 3 generations. Your wolf isn't malformed, it's magnificent. And tonight, when you walk into that dining hall on the arm of the Alpha King, the entire pack is going to see it. She helped Rhiannon into the dress, her weathered hands steady and sure. Your mother gave 6 years of her life to hide you. I've given 65 years pretending to be weak and harmless. Tonight we stop hiding. Tonight you show them what moon-blessed means. Rhiannon looked at herself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly as if it had been made for her. The emerald silk brought out the color in her eyes, made her skin glow. For the first time in 3 years, she looked like more than a shadow. She looked almost like someone who deserved to sit beside a king. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good," Morgan replied. "Your mother was terrified too the night she decided to bind you. Fear is just love desperate to protect itself." She turned Rhiannon to face her. "Now listen carefully. Tonight at dinner, there will be those who try to humiliate you to put you back in your place. Let them try. The Alpha King will handle it. Your job is simply to survive, and remember, you are not defective. You are not broken. You are moon-blessed, and you are loved." The dining hall erupted in whispers when Rhiannon entered on Kael's arm. Every eye tracked their movement to the high table where she was seated, in the place meant for the Alpha King's chosen companion. Her father's face had gone purple with rage and embarrassment. Celine looked ready to shift and attack right there at the table. But it was Ronan's expression that made her wolf stir with satisfaction. Pure, undiluted shock mixed with the first glimmers of fear. "Smile," Kael murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Let them wonder." "They're not wondering," Rhiannon whispered back. "They're plotting my murder. Let them try me." The casual confidence in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded her that she was playing a game she didn't understand with stakes she couldn't fathom. The meal began in tense silence. Rhiannon could barely taste the food, too aware of every stare, every whispered comment. She sat rigid in her chair, the borrowed dress feeling like both armor and target. Then Celine's voice cut through the tension like a blade dipped in honey. "So fascinating that your majesty has taken such an interest in our Omega." She sat across from them, having somehow maneuvered herself into a position of prominence. "Rhiannon has always been special to our pack." The lie was so blatant that Rhiannon nearly choked on her water. "Special." Kael repeated, his tone giving nothing away. "Tell me more about how special she is." Celine's smile flickered with uncertainty. "Well, she's unique. The only Omega in our pack who can't shift properly. It's really quite remarkable, medically speaking." "I see. And you've been kind to her, I assume, as packmates should be." "Of course, we're all family here." "Family." Kael lifted his wineglass, examining the dark liquid as if it held secrets. "Like this morning when you and your brother watched Ronan break a jar and blame her for it." The blood drained from Celine's face. Around the table, conversations died. "Or last week," Kael continued conversationally, "when you poured wolfsbane extract in her wash water, hoping to see if it would burn her skin. How could you possibly know that?" Kael's eyes flashed dangerously. "My scouts arrived days before me, watching reporting. Did you think visiting royalty wouldn't investigate a pack before arriving?" His gaze swept the table, landing on each tormentor in turn. "I know about every slight, every cruelty, every pathetic display of dominance you've inflicted on someone you deemed weaker than yourselves." Alpha Thaddeus stood, his face purple. "Your Majesty, surely these are internal pack matters." "Sit down." The command was delivered so quietly that for a moment Thaddeus might not have heard it. Then he dropped into his chair as if his strings had been cut, the force of an Alpha King's command impossible to resist. The dining hall fell into absolute silence. Kael turned to Rhiannon, and his voice gentled in a way that made her stomach flip. "Would you like to tell me your side of this morning's incident?" She looked around the table at faces twisted with fury, fear, and disbelief. These were people she'd have to live with after he left. "It was nothing," she said quietly. "A misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." He leaned back in his chair, and somehow that casual posture was more threatening than if he'd shifted into his wolf form. "I wonder if it would still be a misunderstanding if I ordered Ronan to kneel before you and beg forgiveness." "Please don't," Rhiannon whispered, horrified. "The retribution would be terrible once you're gone." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. "As you wish." He stood abruptly, extending his hand to her. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Rhiannon placed her trembling hand in his, gasping at the spark that jumped between their skin. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused from years of combat, and her wolf practically sang with joy. They left the dining hall in absolute silence, but Rhiannon could feel the explosive aftermath building behind them, like a storm about to break. The gardens were quiet moonlight, casting everything in silver. Rhiannon's borrowed dress whispered against stone paths as they walked. "You've made everything worse," she finally said. "Once you leave, You are not staying here." She stopped so abruptly he had to catch her to keep her from falling. What? You're coming with me, to Darkmoon Pack. He turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight his eyes seemed to glow. Tonight. I can't just leave. This is my pack. My family. The family that calls you defective. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and the gentle touch contrasted sharply with the fury in his voice. The pack that tortures you daily. Rhiannon pulled away from his touch, needing distance to think clearly. Why do you care what happens to a broken Omega? You're not broken? The words came out as a growl, his wolf clearly close to the surface. And you know why. I don't lie to me. He moved closer, backing her against an ancient oak tree. You feel it too, this pull. Your wolf recognizes mine even through that damn suppression potion. That's impossible. Is it? His hands braced against the tree on either side of her head, caging her in. Tell me you don't feel your wolf trying to reach for mine. Tell me your heart doesn't race when I'm near. Tell me you don't know deep in your bones what this means. She couldn't, because it was all true. You're my mate, he said, and the words fell between them like stones into still water. The universe paired us, Rhiannon, and I'll be damned if I leave you here to suffer another day. Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the night. Then you'll take us both. Morgan stepped from the shadows, no longer leaning on her cane, moving with a grace that belied her years. Behind her, wrapped in a traveling cloak, was a man that looked already packed. Grandmother, I'm done hiding, the old woman said simply, done pretending to be weak while my granddaughter suffers. If Rhiannon leaves tonight, so do I. She fixed Kael with a steady gaze. Your grandmother and I made a pact long ago, that if one of us ever found a way to save our bloodline, the other would help. I'm calling in that debt. Kael studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Can you ride? I'm 87, not dead. A sound made them all turn. Aldrich stood at the garden entrance, his face a mask of anguish. Rhiannon, he said, his voice breaking, please, let me explain. For 6 years, her father had avoided her eyes. Now finally he looked directly at her, and she saw the ocean of grief he'd been drowning in. I knew, he said simply, what your mother was doing, the binding, the sacrifice. She made me promise not to interfere, not to tell you. Said it was the only way to keep you safe. He took a step closer, hands outstretched like a drowning man reaching for shore. Every time I looked at you, I saw her. Saw what she'd given up. The guilt was unbearable. I thought if I pushed you away, it would hurt less, but it just made everything worse. Tears streamed down his face. I failed you. Failed her. I'm so sorry, Rhiannon. I'm so sorry. Rhiannon felt something crack inside her chest. Not the binding around her wolf, but something else. The wall she'd built around her heart to protect herself from her father's rejection. You should have told me, she said, her own tears falling. I thought she died because of me, because I was defective. No. Aldrich closed the distance between them, pulling her into an embrace for the first time in 6 years. Never because of you. Everything she did was for you, because she loved you more than life itself. They stood there, father and daughter, crying together under the moon. Finally, Rhiannon pulled back. I have to go. You understand that, don't you? Aldrich nodded, wiping his eyes. The Alpha King will protect you in ways I never could. He looked at Kael. Take care of her. She's all I have left of Freya. I will guard her with my life, Kael replied, and it sounded like a vow. Aldrich turned to Morgan. And you, old woman, I should have listened to you years ago. Should have been stronger. You loved her, Morgan said gently. Sometimes love makes us weak. Sometimes it makes us strong. Tonight you are finally strong enough to let go. Movement in the shadows caught Rhiannon's attention. Other wolves were gathering, drawn by the commotion. She saw Ronan, Celine, Declan, all the faces that had made her life miserable. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. The potion's effects were finally wearing off completely, and her wolf surged forward with a force that made her gasp. Rhiannon, Kael warned, sensing the change. But she stepped away from both him and her father, moving to stand in the center of the garden where everyone could see her. I have something to say. Her voice carried across the night, stronger than it had ever been. For 3 years you've called me broken, defective, worthless. You've made me believe I was a mistake, a burden, something to be ashamed of. The binding around her wolf cracked further, and she felt power beginning to leak through. But I'm not broken. I'm moon-blessed. Gasps echoed through the gathered wolves. My mother gave her life to hide me. My grandmother has hidden her true nature for 65 years to protect our bloodline. And you, she looked at each tormentor in turn. You never broke me. You just taught me to survive. And now I'm done surviving. She turned to Kael. I accept your offer. I'll come to Darkmoon Pack. Not because you're rescuing me, but because I choose it. I choose you. I choose myself. Then she faced the pack one final time. I, Rhiannon Ashwood, formally renounce my ties to this pack. I reject those who rejected me. I choose a new path. The formal words of pack renunciation hung in the air. Once spoken, they couldn't be taken back. Alpha Thaddeus stepped forward, fury and fear warring on his face. You need Alpha permission. Actually, Morrigan said, her voice ringing with authority. She doesn't. Moon-blessed wolves supersede normal pack law. They answer to no Alpha save their chosen mate. Ancient law older than your precious hierarchies. She stepped forward, and suddenly, impossibly, she was glowing. Faint silver light emanated from her skin, her eyes flashing with power that had been hidden for decades. I am Morrigan's last of the moon-blessed elders. I witnessed the great division. I survived the purge, and I declare my granddaughter free of all pack bonds. The gathered wolves fell to their knees, unable to resist the command in her voice. Kael moved to Rhiannon's gate, his hand finding hers. Well, he said with something that might have been admiration, that was dramatic. Despite everything, Rhiannon laughed. It was slightly hysterical, but it was real. Can we leave now before I completely fall apart? We ride within the hour, he said. Then louder, addressing the kneeling pack, any who challenge Rhiannon's choice will answer to me in formal combat. No one moved. No one dared. As they turned to leave, Rhiannon took one last look at the pack grounds that had been her prison for 21 years. At her father, who raised a hand in farewell, forgiveness and grief mingled in his eyes. At the wolves who had tormented her, now forced to watch her leave on the arm of a king, and at the moon hanging full and bright above it all. Her grandmother was right. Destiny didn't make mistakes. It just took its time revealing the truth. The road stretched before them like a silver ribbon beneath the moon, 3 horses carrying 3 souls toward a future none of them could fully see. Rhiannon rode between Kael and Morrigan, her body aching from hours in the saddle, her mind still reeling from everything that had shattered and reformed in the span of a single night. Behind them, a dozen of Kael's warriors followed at a respectful distance, silent shadows that melted into the forest darkness. She'd left everything she'd ever known. Her father's grief-stricken face, the pack grounds where her mother had died, the small room under the stairs where she'd counted every humiliation, every wound, and yet she felt lighter than she had in years. The binding around her wolf was cracking further with each passing mile, like ice breaking up in spring thaw. She could feel her wolf more clearly now. Not the pathetic, malformed thing she'd believed it to be, but something vast and powerful that had been compressed into too small a space for too long. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was freedom, and she had no idea what to do with it. We'll stop at dawn, Kael said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. There's a way station another hour's ride. Safe ground. Neutral territory. Rhiannon nodded, too exhausted to speak. Her hands were blistered from gripping the reins, her legs trembling from the effort of staying upright. She'd never ridden this far this fast. Omegas didn't learn to ride. They stayed close to pack grounds, kept small and contained. But she wasn't an Omega anymore. She wasn't sure what she was. Morrigan rode with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime on horseback, despite her 87 years. The frail, trembling old woman was gone completely, now replaced by someone who sat straight-backed and alert, her eyes scanning the darkness with the wariness of a survivor. You're staring, her grandmother said, without looking at her. You're different, Rhiannon replied. Out here, away from the pack. I'm myself, Morrigan's voice was quiet. For the first time in 65 years, you don't have to pretend to be weak. Don't have to shuffle and shake and play the harmless crone. She turned to look at Rhiannon, and in the moonlight, her face seemed younger somehow. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to hide your strength every single day of your life? Rhiannon thought of 3 years spent making herself small, invisible, swallowing every spark of anger or pain or defiance. Yes, she said. I think I do. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the horses' hooves on packed earth and the distant calls of night birds. Rhiannon found herself watching Kael's back, the way he moved with his mount, as if they were one creature, the easy confidence in every line of his body. He'd called her his mate, fated, chosen by the goddess herself. But what did that mean? What did he expect from her? What did she expect from herself? The questions circled in her mind like wolves around a campfire, drawing closer, but never quite close enough to touch. The way station was a simple structure of stone and timber built into the side of a hill. Kael's warriors cleared it quickly, ensuring no threats lurked in the shadows. Then fires were lit, horses tended, and a cold meal laid out that tasted better than any feast Rhiannon had ever attended. She sat close to the fire, wrapped in a cloak Kael had given her, watching the flames dance and flicker. Her body ached in ways she'd never experienced. Her mind felt like it had been scraped raw, but she was alive. She was free. She was terrified. Morgan settled beside her with a soft sigh, accepting a cup of hot tea from one of the warriors with a nod of thanks. "You should sleep," her grandmother said. "We have 2 more days of riding ahead of us." "I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see—" Rhiannon stopped, unsure how to finish. "Your mother," Morgan finished gently. "I know. I see her too." They sat together in silence, 2 women bound by blood and loss and secrets that spanned generations. Around them, the warriors made camp with practiced efficiency, speaking in low voices that didn't disturb the night. "Tell me about her," Rhiannon said finally. "The real her, not the sick woman fading away. Who was my mother before the binding?" Morgan's eyes grew distant, seeing something beyond the firelight. "Freya was wild," she said, "and there was love in every syllable. From the moment she could walk, she was running. The binding I'd placed on my own wolf didn't extend to her. I'd hoped the bloodline would skip a generation, that she'd be born fully human or fully normal wolf. But the goddess had other plans." She sipped her tea, gathering memories like scattered pages. She shifted for the first time at 16. "I'd taught her to suppress it, to hide what she was, but the full moon called to her too strongly. She went deep into the forest where no one would see and let her wolf free." Morgan smiled, but it was edged with sorrow. Her wolf was pure silver Rhiannon, like liquid moonlight given form. She ran for 3 days straight without tiring. And when she finally came home, she told me she'd found the place where the sky met the earth, where the old gods still walked. "She was happy," Rhiannon whispered, deliriously. "For 6 months she would sneak away during full moons and run. She thought she was being careful, thought no one knew." Morgan's expression darkened. "But someone saw, someone reported, and the council sent hunters." Rhiannon's breath caught. "What happened?" "She ran, barely escaped with her life, came home bloodied and terrified, told me they'd killed 3 other young moon-blessed in the surrounding territories." Morgan set down her cup, her hands trembling slightly. "That's when she decided to disappear completely. She suppressed her wolf, dyed her hair dark, changed her name, and went to a gathering 3 territories away. That's where she met your father." "Did he know?" "Not at first. Aldrich was young, kind, not particularly powerful, which made him perfect. A weak wolf wouldn't attract attention, wouldn't be suspected of hiding something precious." Morgan looked at Rhiannon. "She didn't love him when they married, but she grew to love him. He was good to her in his way. And when you were conceived, when she felt your power even in the womb, she knew she'd make any sacrifice necessary to keep you safe." The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. 6 years, Rhiannon said. She gave herself 6 years. Every day was a choice. Every morning she woke up a little weaker, knowing that each breath she took was one less breath she'd have. But she never wavered, never regretted. Morgan's voice broke. "The last thing she said to me was, 'Make sure Rhiannon knows she was loved. Make sure she knows this wasn't her fault.'" Tears streamed down Rhiannon's face. "I thought she died ashamed of me." "She died proud of you. Died knowing she'd given you a chance at life the council would have stolen." Morgan pulled her granddaughter close. "And now you're free. Now you can be what she never got, to be a moon-blessed who doesn't have to hide." They held each other, the 2 generations of women who'd survived when they shouldn't have, who'd carried secrets that should have crushed them, who'd loved despite the cost. Across the fire, Kael watched them with an expression Rhiannon couldn't quite read. Morning came too quickly and too slowly at once. Rhiannon woke to find Morgan already up, speaking quietly with Magnus Kael's beta. The massive wolf looked like he'd been carved from granite, all hard edges and battle scars, but he listened to Morgan with the respect usually reserved for pack elders. "The old ways," Magnus was saying. "We thought they were low." "Hidden," Morgan corrected. "Not lost. There's a difference." Kael appeared at Rhiannon's side with a cup of something hot and fragrant. "Tea helps with the soreness from riding." She accepted it gratefully, their fingers brushing. That same electric spark jumped between them, and her wolf stirred, reaching for his. He pulled his hand back, quickly, deliberately, creating distance. "We should talk," he said, "about what happens when we reach Darkmoon." Rhiannon's stomach nodded. "All right." They walked away from the camp, following a narrow path that led to a ridge overlooking the forest below. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. You called me your mate, Rhiannon said when they stopped, in front of everyone, but you've barely touched me since. You sleep on the opposite side of the fire. You ride ahead instead of beside me. I'm giving you space, Kael replied, not meeting her eyes. Time to adjust, to understand what's happening. I don't want space. I want answers. She moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at her. What do you expect from me? What does being your mate mean? He was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. When I was 13 years old, he finally said, I killed my father. The words fell between them like stones. He'd gone mad, started seeing enemies everywhere, executed 3 pack members for imaginary treason, was planning to kill more. Kael's hands clenched into fists. My mother came to me in the night, put a silver dagger in my hands, and begged me to end it. To save the pack. Rhiannon couldn't breathe. I challenged him formally. Thought maybe I could just wound him, force him to submit. But when we fought, when his madness turned him into something that wasn't my father anymore, He stopped, his voice breaking. I tore out his throat, became Alpha at 13, became a murderer. You saved your pack. I killed my father, but his silver eyes met hers and she saw the boy he'd been terrified and drowning in blood. The council used it against me for years, called me unstable, dangerous, too young, too violent, unfit to lead. Every territory I united, they said I conquered through brutality. Every reform I made, they called tyranny. He turned away, looking out over the forest. I've been alone for 13 years, Rhiannon, surrounded by wolves who fear me or want to use me, but never truly seen by anyone. And then I walk into a pack gathering in a nothing territory, and I feel you before I even see you. Feel your wolf calling to mine, feel this recognition that goes deeper than bone, deeper than blood. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. You're my mate, the one person in all the territories who's supposed to understand me, accept me, be my equal in all things. But I'm terrified that if I push too fast, if I demand too much, you'll wake up one day and realize you didn't choose this. That fate trapped you with a king who has blood on his hands and darkness in his soul. Rhiannon moved before she could think, closing the distance between them and taking his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I did choose this. I chose you in that garden when I could have stayed silent. I chose you when I renounced my pack. I chose you when I climbed on that horse. Her voice was steady. Sure, you think you're the only one with darkness? I've spent 3 years being told I'm worthless, broken, less than nothing. I've swallowed so much rage and pain that I don't even know who I am without it. She held his gaze. We're both damaged, both carrying wounds that might never fully heal. But maybe that's exactly why fate paired us, because we understand what it costs to survive, to keep going when everything says to give up. Kael's hands came up to cover hers, his touch gentle despite his strength. I don't want to rescue you, he said. I want to stand beside you, but I need you to understand what that means. I'm not some fairy tale prince. I'm a king who's made hard choices, who's killed to protect what's mine, who carries the weight of 6 territories on his shoulders. Good, Rhiannon replied, because I'm not some helpless Omega waiting to be saved. I'm moon-blessed, and once I learn to control this power, I'm going to be terrifying. He laughed, then a real laugh that transformed his face from stern and dangerous to almost boyish. Yes, he said, you are. They stood there as the sun rose, fully 2 broken pieces that somehow fit together, beginning to understand that maybe fate hadn't made a mistake after all. Darkmoon Pack territory was nothing like Rhiannon had imagined. She'd expected something similar to Ashwood wooden structures, muddy grounds, the constant smell of wet fur and wood smoke. What she found instead was a city carved from the mountains themselves. Obsidian towers rose from living rock, their surfaces polished to mirror brightness. Bridges of stone and silver connected buildings at dizzying heights, and waterfalls cascaded between structures, their mist creating permanent rainbows in the mountain air. The streets were paved with a smooth stone lined with shops and homes that looked prosperous and well-maintained. And the wolves, they were everywhere. But unlike Ashwood, where hierarchy was enforced through fear and violence, here, she saw alphas working alongside omegas, betas, laughing with deltas. The rigid caste system seemed softer somehow, more fluid. As their group approached the main gates, wolves began to gather. Hundreds of them in both human and animal form, creating a corridor of bodies. And then as one they bowed. Not to Kael, to her. They're bowing to me, Rhiannon whispered, panic rising. You're moon-blessed, Kael replied quietly. And you're my mate, they're showing respect. The gates opened, massive doors of silver and obsidian depicting the phases of the moon. Beyond them, a courtyard filled with even more wolves, all waiting, all watching. Kael dismounted first, then turned to help Rhiannon down. The moment her feet touched Darkmoon ground, a cheer erupted so loud and sudden that she nearly jumped. "Welcome home," Kael said just for her. Then raising his voice to carry across the courtyard, "Behold Rhiannon Moon, blessed last daughter of the ancient line and my chosen mate." Another cheer even louder. Rhiannon felt tears prickling her eyes. No mockery, no disgust, just genuine joy and welcome. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, older, perhaps 50, with silver threading through her dark hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "My queen," she said, bowing low, "I am Marjorie, head of the household. Your chambers have been prepared in the moon tower, unless," she glanced at Kael, "you preferred to share the king's chambers." Heat flooded Rhiannon's cheeks. "The moon tower sounds perfect." Kael's lips twitched with amusement. "For now." As Marjorie led her through the fortress, Rhiannon marveled at the architecture. Moonstone was embedded in every wall, glowing softly with captured light. Tapestries depicted wolf history. She recognized scenes from Morrigan's stories, including several that showed silver wolves she now knew were moon-blessed. "Your pack honors them," she observed, "the moon-blessed, even after they were hunted." "Darkmoon was founded by a wolf saved by a moon-blessed healer," Marjorie explained. "We've never forgotten that debt. When other packs voted to hunt them, we abstained. It caused a rift that exists to this day." They reached a spiral staircase lined with windows that caught the afternoon light. At the top, double doors opened into chambers that stole Rhiannon's breath. The room was circular with a glass ceiling that would show the night sky. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with more volumes than she'd ever seen in her life. A writing desk sat by a window overlooking the entire territory. The bed was massive, draped in silver and midnight blue. "This is too much," Rhiannon breathed. "This is exactly enough." Morgan's voice came from behind them. Her grandmother entered looking pleased. "Moon-blessed, we're always scholars and seers. You'll need these resources for your training." "Training? Did you think awakening your wolf was the end?" Morgan's eyes glinted with amusement. "Child, it was barely the beginning. You can shift now, yes, but can you walk on moonbeams, see through shadows, speak to the goddess herself? Those are myths. So was your existence until 3 days ago." Morgan moved to the bookshelves, pulling out a silver-bound volume. "Your education begins tomorrow. Tonight, rest. Let your wolf settle into its new home." After they left, Rhiannon stood at the window watching the sun set over her new territory. Wolves moved through the streets below with purpose and dignity. No one cowered, no one was forced to hide. This was what freedom looked like. A knock at the door startled her. "Come in." A group of women entered, ranging in age from perhaps 30 to 70. They bowed, then straightened, their faces warm and welcoming. "My lady," the eldest said, "we are the circle of mothers, elder females who preserve pack history and train young wolves. We wanted to welcome you properly and offer our services as mentors." Rhiannon blinked back tears. "You want to teach me? We want to learn from you," another corrected gently. "Moon-blessed wisdom has been lost for generations. But we also want to help you understand what it means to be part of a pack that honors strength in all its forms. Not just physical power, but wisdom, compassion, resilience." They spent an hour sharing stories, offering advice, making Rhiannon feel less like a curiosity and more like someone genuinely valued. When they finally left, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt like she belonged. The next morning, Rhiannon woke to find training clothes laid out on a chair, soft leather pants, and a tunic that fit perfectly. She found Magnus waiting in the courtyard along with a dozen other wolves in various states of readiness. "Your Majesty requested combat training," the beta said with a slight bow. "I'm to teach you how to use your wolf form's advantages in battle." "I don't know how to fight." "Then we'll start with the basics." His smile was surprisingly gentle for such a fierce-looking wolf. "Shift for me. Let's see what we're working with." Rhiannon hesitated. The last time she'd shifted that terrible, beautiful night in the Ashwood Gardens, it had been explosive, uncontrolled. What if she couldn't do it again? What if it had been a fluke? But she closed her eyes, reached for her wolf, and the transformation rippled through her like water, smooth and natural. One moment she was human, the next she stood on 4 legs, her vision sharper, her sense of smell overwhelming in its complexity. And she could see herself reflected in the polished obsidian walls. Her wolf was massive, larger than any normal female wolf had a right to be. Her fur, no, not quite fur, seemed to be made of crystalline facets, each one catching the morning light refracting it into dancing spectrums of color. The effect was breathtaking, like living gemstone brought to life. When she moved, she left faint silver paw prints that glowed for a few seconds before fading. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She was everything she'd been told she could never be. "Goddess, protect us," Magnus breathed. The legends pale in comparison. Training was brutal and exhilarating. Magnus taught her how to use her unusual form's advantages. Her crystalline fur could reflect light to blind opponents. Her claws could score marks in stone that normal wolves couldn't scratch, and her size gave her strength she was only beginning to understand. But she was clumsy, unused to her own power. She crashed into walls, misjudged distances, fell more times than she could count. "You're fighting your wolf," Magnus observed after she tumbled for the fifth time. "Stop trying to control every movement. Trust your instincts." "My instincts have been suppressed for 21 years. I don't know what they are anymore." "Then learn." He shifted into his own wolf form, a massive creature of dark brown fur and battle scars. "Attack me. Don't think. Just react." Rhiannon lunged, and for the first time she let her wolf take over completely. The fight was brief and utterly one-sided. Magnus was a seasoned warrior. She was barely more than a pup. But in those few moments of pure instinct, she felt what it was supposed to be like. The joy of movement, the thrill of matching strength against strength, the rightness of being fully herself. When Magnus pinned her easily, she was laughing. "Good," he said, shifting back. "That's good. You're starting to trust your wolf. Now we build on that." Afternoons belonged to Morrigan and the ancient books. The library in the Moon Tower was vast, containing texts Rhiannon could barely comprehend. Morrigan guided her through them with patience, explaining histories that had been erased from common knowledge. "Moon-blessed weren't just powerful," her grandmother said one afternoon, her finger tracing text written in a language Rhiannon was learning to read. "We were judges. Our gift of truth-seeing made us incorruptible arbiters of justice. We could look into someone's eyes and see every lie they'd ever told, every crime they'd committed, every secret they'd tried to hide. That's why the council wanted us dead," Rhiannon realized. "We could expose them." "Exactly. An alpha who rules through deception and corruption cannot tolerate someone who sees absolute truth." Morgan closed the book. "Your mother could see lies like other wolves see colors. It's how she knew your father was genuinely kind despite his weakness. It's how she knew the council would never stop hunting our bloodline." "Can I do it? See truth?" "With practice. It's not automatic. You have to focus to open yourself to it. And be warned, once you see someone's truth, you can never unsee it. It will haunt you." They practiced for hours, Rhiannon learning to quiet her mind, to look beyond surface appearances. At first she saw nothing. Then slowly she began to perceive flickers, moments when someone's words didn't match the truth beneath. It was exhausting. It was extraordinary. It was power she'd never imagined possessing. Evenings belonged to Kael. He would arrive after his duties meetings with advisors, training with warriors, the endless work of governing 6 territories, and they would walk the fortress walls talking about everything and nothing. "Tell me about the territories you've united," Rhiannon said one night as they watched the stars emerge. 6 separate packs," Kael replied, "all fighting over resources while their people starved. I didn't conquer them. I offered them a choice: unite under one banner, share resources fairly, or watch your wolves die from pride and stubbornness." And they chose unity. Most did. A few required more persuasion. His jaw tightened. "The council calls it tyranny. I call it survival. When I took over, 3 of the 6 territories were on the brink of collapse. Young wolves were dying from preventable diseases. Omegas were being killed for sport. Now those same territories thrive. You saved them. I gave them a chance to save themselves." He looked at her. "There's a difference. I'm not a hero, Rhiannon. I'm just someone who got tired of watching wolves suffer when there was a better way." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. That spark was always there, that sense of rightness. "The council must hate that," she said. "They hate anything that threatens their power structure, which is why they'll try to destroy you. You represent change they can't control." "Let them try." Rhiannon felt her wolf stir with challenge. "I'm done being afraid." He squeezed her hand and something vulnerable flickered across his face. "You won't lose me. We're going to face whatever comes together. That's what mates do, right? Stand beside each other. No matter what." He kissed her, then soft and careful, a question and a promise all at once. And when she kissed him back, her wolf sang with joy. The weeks passed in a blur of training and learning and slowly building trust. Rhiannon grew stronger each day. Her shifts became smoother, her control more precise. She learned to channel moonlight through her faceted fur, creating bursts of blinding light. She learned to phase partially shifting, just her claws or her senses when needed. And she learned to see truth though it came with a cost Morrigan had warned her about. Once you truly saw someone, all their pain, all their secrets, you carried that knowledge forever. She was in the library one afternoon deep in a text about ancient, moon-blessed combat techniques when she felt it. A pull, like someone calling her name from very far away. She stood moving to the window. The full moon was rising even though it was only late afternoon, hanging impossibly bright in the skiwa. And then she heard it, a voice on the wind that shouldn't exist. Sister. Rhiannon spun, but the room was empty. Sister of moon and shadow, we see you. Her heart raced. Who are you? We are the forgotten, the hidden, the moon-blessed who survived. We wake because you wake. We rise because you rise. The connection faded, leaving Rhiannon shaking. She ran from the tower, nearly colliding with Kael in the corridor below. What's wrong? There are others, she gasped. Other moon-blessed. I heard them. They're calling to each other through the moonlight. Kael's eyes widened. That's impossible. The council swears you're the last. The council lies. Morgentuan appeared, having heard the commotion. I've been waiting for this. The full moon after a moon-blessed awakening sends out a call. Any with the bloodline will hear it. How many? Kael demanded. Unknown. But if even a handful survived, Morrigan smiled, the council's worst nightmare is about to come true. Over the next week they came. First was Nova, 25 years old with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. She arrived on foot, having walked 3 territories to reach them. Her grandmother had died the year before the last of the old network that had protected them. I thought I was alone, Nova said, tears streaming down her face as she embraced Rhiannon. I thought everyone was gone. 2 days later, Astrid appeared, 23, with an otherworldly quality that made even Morrigan pause. She had visions, she explained, prophecies that came to her in dreams and waking moments alike. I saw you, she told Rhiannon. Months ago, saw a silver wolf rising from darknesses, calling others home. That's how I knew to come. And finally, Zephyra, 22, quiet and intense, whose wolf form looked like captured northern lights made solid. Each had been hidden by grandmothers who were part of Morrigan's secret network. Each had been bound, suppressed, told they were defective. Each had awakened when Rhiannon did the bindings, breaking in response to her call. They gathered in the moon tower 4 young women who shouldn't exist, and 1 old woman who'd kept them all alive through sheer stubborn will. There are more, Morrigan said. At least 8 others I know of, possibly more. Hidden so deep even I don't know where. But they'll feel the call. They'll come when they're ready. The council won't allow this, Nova said quietly. They'll see us as a threat. Well, we are a threat, Rhiannon replied, to every corrupt system they've built, every hierarchy that crushes the weak to benefit the strong. We're living proof that their justifications for the purge were lies. Then they'll try to kill us, Zephyra said flatly. Let them try. Rhiannon stood, moving to the window where she could see Darkmoon spread below. We're not alone anymore. We're not hiding, and we have the backing of the Alpha King. About that, Astrid said, her voice taking on that distant prophetic quality. There's something you all need to know. I had a vision last night. A warning. Everyone turned to look at her. The Council of Alphas has invoked the ancient accords. They're demanding Rhiannon appear before them for heritage verification within the month. If she refuses, she'll be declared rogue, a legal target for any wolf to hunt. Kael, who'd been standing in the doorway, stepped into the room. They can't enforce that. She's under my protection. They can and they will, Morrigan said grimly. It's an old law from before the moon-blessed purge. Any wolf of questionable heritage must be verified by the full council. It was originally meant to prevent false claims of nobility. So they'll use it to trap her, Magnus said, having followed Kael. Get her in front of the council, expose her as moon-blessed, and then execute her legally, Morrigan finished, just as they did to my family 70 years ago. Silence fell over the room. Then I don't go, Rhiannon said. If you refuse, they'll send hunters. Not just for you, but for all of us. Nova gestured to the other young women. They'll use you as an excuse to finish what they started. Then we fight, Zephyra said. We can't fight the entire council, Astrid countered. We're only 4 moon-blessed, and most of us barely know how to use our powers. Then we learn fast, Rhiannon said firmly. We have a month. We train together, we practice combining our powers, and we go to the council meeting, prepared to defend ourselves. Not with violence, but with truth. She looked at each face in turn. We show them what moon-blessed really means. We prove we're not a threat to innocent wolves, only to those who abuse power. And we force them to acknowledge us as legitimate or expose themselves as the tyrants they are. That's incredibly naive, Magnus muttered. Or incredibly brave, Kael corrected. He moved to stand beside Rhiannon, his hand finding hers. I'll prepare my warriors. If the council tries anything, they'll have to go through Darkmoon Pack first. And me, Morgan added. I've hidden long enough. If they want to judge moon-blessed heritage, they can start with the oldest living member of our bloodline. Nova, Astrid, and Zephyra exchanged glances, then nodded. We stand together, Nova said. All of us, Astrid confirmed. No more hiding, Zephyra finished. Over the next weeks, the Moon Tower became a fortress of learning. The four young women trained together, discovering that their powers could amplify each other. Nova's gift for healing could enhance Rhiannon's truth-seeing. Astrid's prophecies became clearer when channeled through Zephyra's connection to natural forces. They were stronger together than any of them were alone. And slowly, carefully, Rhiannon began to understand what it meant to have sisters. Not by blood, but by shared experience, shared pain, shared hope. They traded stories late into the night. Nova spoke of watching her grandmother die, knowing she was the last. Astrid described the terror of her first vision, thinking she was going mad. Zephyra whispered about the loneliness of being different, of never quite fitting anywhere. And Rhiannon told them about 3 years of believing she was broken, about a mother who died to save her, about finally learning her pain had purpose. We're survivors, Nova said one night, as they sat together under the glass ceiling, watching the stars. All of us, we survived when we shouldn't have. Now we have to figure out what to do with that gift. We change things, Rhiannon said softly. We make sure no other young wolf has to suffer like we did. That's the whole point of surviving, to make the world better for those who come after. On the 25th day, a messenger arrived from the council. The summons was formal, written on parchment that smelled of old power and older threats. Rhiannon was to appear before the Council of Alphas in 5 days' time at the neutral grounds in the Whispering Valley. She could bring advisors, but no army. Kael read it, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. It's a trap. They'll have their own warriors hidden in the valley. The moment they confirm you're moon-blessed, they'll attack. Probably, Rhiannon agreed, surprisingly calm. But we're going anyway. Rhiannon, we're going because if we don't, they win without even fighting. We're going because running would prove we're afraid of them. She took the parchment from his hands. And we're going because it's time the council learned that moon-blessed don't kneel to anyone except those we choose to respect. That night, Astrid woke screaming from a vision so violent it brought everyone running. What did you see? Rhiannon demanded, holding the shaking young woman. The council. Astrid gasped. I saw the council gathering, 7 alphas. But one of them, she looked up, her eyes wide with terror. One of them isn't what he seems. One of them is corrupted, twisted, fed on dark magic for so long that he's become something else. Which one? I couldn't see clearly, but I heard a name, Dorian, and I saw. She shuddered. I saw him recognize someone, an old woman with silver hair, someone he thought he'd killed decades ago. Morgan's face had gone pale. Dorian Blackthorn. You know him? He was the one who led the hunt that killed my husband. He was young, then an ambitious alpha seeking favor with the council. He's the one who ordered the execution of my family. Morgan's hands trembled. If he's still alive, still on the council, then he's over 100 years old, and no wolf lives that long naturally. Unless he found a way to extend his life, Kael said grimly. Dark magic, consuming the essence of other wolves to sustain himself. That's what I saw in the vision, Astrid confirmed. Shadows, darkness, wolves screaming as their essence was torn away. Rhiannon felt ice settle in her stomach. He's the real threat. Not the council as a whole, but this one corrupted alpha who's been hiding in plain sight for decades. Then we expose him, Nova said. Use Rhiannon's truth-seeing, make him reveal himself in front of everyone. If we can get close enough, Zephyra added, if he's that powerful, that old, he'll have defenses. Then we'll need a plan, Magnus said. Not just to survive the council meeting, but to turn it into our opportunity. Expose Dorian, prove the council's corruption, and force them to acknowledge you not as threats, but as legitimate. They spent the next 3 days planning, preparing, practicing. The four Moonblessed worked on combining their powers into what Morgan called a constellation formation, a technique from ancient texts where multiple Moonblessed could channel their abilities through each other, amplifying their strength exponentially. It was exhausting. It was dangerous. They collapsed more than once from the strain, but they were getting stronger. On the final night before they had to leave, Rhiannon stood on her balcony watching the moon rise over Darkmoon. Tomorrow they would ride to the council grounds. Tomorrow everything would change one way or another. She felt Kael's presence before she heard him, that constant pull between them that had only grown stronger over the past month. "Ready?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "No, but I'm going anyway." He took her hand and she leaned into his warmth. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "know that I'm proud of you, proud of the strength you've found, proud of the leader you're becoming." "I'm terrified." "Good, means you understand the stakes." He turned her to face him. "But you're not alone. You have 3 other moon-blessed, a grandmother who survived worse, a pack that would die to protect you, and a mate who will stand beside you no matter what comes." She kissed him, then pouring everything she couldn't say into that contact. Love and fear and determination and hope all tangled together. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Tomorrow we change the world." "Or die trying," he added, trying for humor. "Or die trying," she agreed, "but at least we'll do it together." The Whispering Valley lived up to its name. Wind moved through ancient pines with a sound like voices murmuring secrets, and the morning mist clung to the ground like nervous breath. The natural amphitheater had been carved by time and water, a circular depression in the earth surrounded by stone walls that seemed to remember every challenge, every judgment, every execution that had taken place within them. Rhiannon stood at the valley's edge, looking down at the 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle. Already 5 of the 7 council alphas had arrived, their warriors forming ranks behind them. Hundreds of wolves in both forms creating a wall of muscle and menace. Kael's hand found hers steady and warm. "Last chance to run," he said quietly. "Forward is the only direction I know anymore." She squeezed his fingers. "Besides, we have a plan." Plans rarely survive first contact with reality. "Then we'll improvise." She turned to look at him, memorizing his face in case this was the last quiet moment they'd have. "Thank you for giving me a choice, for standing beside me instead of in front of me." "Always," he promised. Behind them, the others prepared for descent. Nova and Zephyra checked each other's gear with the efficiency of warriors, though they'd been training for mere weeks, not years. Astrid stood with her eyes closed, muttering under her breath. Prophecies or prayers, Rhiannon couldn't tell which. Morgan stood apart, leaning on her walking stick, the frail old woman facade back in place. But Rhiannon could see the steel in her grandmother's spine, the readiness in her stance. Today the pretending would end. Magnus approached with 50 Darkmoon warriors, the maximum Kael was permitted to bring under the ancient accords. "They're outnumbered 5 to 1, the beta said grimly. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," Kael interrupted with more confidence than Rhiannon felt. They descended into the valley. With each step, Rhiannon felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. How many moon-blessed had been judged here? How many had knelt before these thrones and never risen again? The crowd parted as they approached wolves, drawing back to create a corridor. Rhiannon walked it with her head high, her hands still in Kael's, refusing to show fear, even as her pulse hammered. The 5 seated alphas watched with varying expressions. Most showed curiosity mixed with wariness. One, a female alpha with iron-gray hair and shrewd eyes, looked almost approving. But it was the 6th alpha, just arriving from the opposite entrance, who made Rhiannon's wolf growl low in her throat. Dorian Blackthorn. He looked perhaps 60, distinguished in the way powerful men often are, with silver threading through dark hair and a face that suggested both wisdom and cruelty. But his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too aware, holding knowledge that no 60-year-old should possess. And when those eyes landed on Morgan, they widened with something that looked impossibly like recognition. "You," he breathed, barely audible across the distance. Morgan smiled, and it was not kind. The 7th alpha arrived moments later, the council chair, an ancient wolf named Theron, who looked like he'd been carved from weathered oak. He took his throne with deliberate slowness, surveying the gathered wolves with rheumy eyes that nonetheless missed nothing. "We are convened," Theron announced, his voice surprisingly strong. "Let the matter of heritage verification proceed." Rhiannon stepped forward, Kael releasing her hand. She stood alone in the center of the amphitheater, facing 7 alphas, who held the power of life and death over every wolf in the territories. "State your name and lineage," Theron commanded. "Rhiannon, daughter of Freya, daughter of Morrigan of the Moon, blessed line." Her voice carried clearly across the valley. "I stand before this council not to beg for acknowledgement, but to claim what is mine by birthright and blood." Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. "The moon-blessed Linen was exterminated 70 years ago," Dorian said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. Any claiming that heritage is either deluded or a liar. Or inconvenient, Rhiannon replied, meeting his eyes. Tell me, Alpha Dorian, how old are you exactly? His expression flickered. 62. Why does that matter? 62. Rhiannon let the words hang. Yet I have records showing you led hunts against moon-blessed families 70 years ago, which would make you at least 90, perhaps older. The murmurs grew louder. Ridiculous, Dorian scoffed. You're attempting to deflect from your own false claims. Prove it, interrupted the female alpha with gray hair. Prove you're moon-blessed. Shift for us. Rhiannon glanced at Kael, who nodded slightly. They'd expected this. She closed her eyes, reached for her wolf, and let the transformation flow through her like water returning to the sea. The shift was smooth, controlled, beautiful. One moment she stood on 2 legs, the next on 4, and her crystalline form blazed in the morning sun, each facet of fur refracting light like living diamonds, throwing prisms of color across the stone amphitheater. Gasps echoed from every direction. She was magnificent and impossible, every inch of her screaming truth to anyone with eyes to see it. This was no normal wolf. This was something ancient, something powerful, something that had been hunted to near extinction because of that power. Impossible, someone whispered. An illusion, Dorian declared, but his voice had gone tight. Some trick of light, and 3 more transformations rippled through the valley. Nova shifted into her silver form, pure as moonlight on water. Saphira became living aurora colors dancing across her fur like captured sky. And Astrid's wolf seemed made of starlight itself, translucent and shimmering. 4 moon-blessed stood together, undeniable proof that the bloodline had survived. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind whispering through the pines. Then Theron spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The council acknowledges the heritage claim. These are indeed moon-blessed. He paused, letting that sink in. The question now is what we do about it. They are dangerous, Dorian said quickly, standing from his throne. Their very existence threatens pack stability. The ancient purge was justified. These creatures can see truth, can judge without mercy, can expose corruption wherever it hides. Rhiannon interrupted, shifting back to human form. The others followed her lead, 4 young women standing naked and unashamed before the council, clothed only in moonlight and certainty. She fixed her gaze on Dorian, and this time she let her power fully unfold. The truth-seeing gift that Morrigan had been teaching her to control flooded through her, and suddenly she could see Dorian not as he appeared, but as he truly was. The handsome exterior was a shell. Beneath it, something writhed and twisted, sustained by magic so dark it made her stomach turn. She saw flashes of memory wolves screaming as their essence was torn away, young moon-blessed, hunted down and slain decades upon decades of carefully hidden crimes. And she saw how old he truly was. 123 years. Sustained by consuming the life force of others, by dark rituals that should have been forgotten, by ambition that had curdled into madness so slowly he might not have noticed his own corruption. You're a monster, she whispered, and you're a threat that must be eliminated. Dorian raised his hand, and wolves behind him tensed, ready to attack on his command. No, the word came from Morrigan. The old woman stepped forward, and as she did, she shed the pretense of frailty like a snake shedding skin. Her posture straightened, her eyes cleared, and power radiated from her in waves that made every wolf in the valley instinctively submit. You, Dorian breathed again, and this time there was fear in his voice. You should be dead. I killed your entire family. I watched you burn. You watched someone burn, Morrigan corrected. My friend who took my place so I could escape with my infant daughter. She died screaming, and I have carried that guilt for 65 years. She moved closer to the council thrones, her walking stick now a weapon in her hands rather than a crutch. I am Morrigan, eldest daughter of the Silver Moon Line, survivor of the Great Purge, and I am 87 years old. I have hidden my true nature for longer than most of you have been alive, but I am done hiding. And then she shifted. At 87 years old, Morrigan transformed into her wolf form for the first time in 6.5 decades. Her wolf was silver-white, smaller than the younger Moonblessed, but radiating power that made them all look like candles beside a bonfire. Scars crisscrossed her pelt, evidence of battles fought and survived, of a life lived in hiding, but never in surrender. She was the oldest Moonblessed shift on record, and she was glorious. The entire valley fell to its knees. Even the alphas on their thrones bowed their heads, unable to resist the command of someone who had survived, when she shouldn't have, who had preserved a bloodline through sheer stubborn will. Dorian alone remained standing, his face twisted with rage and fear. You cannot do this, he snarled. The council voted. The council voted based on lies you fed them, Morgan said, shifting back with the ease of long practice. You told them Moonblessed were dangerous, unstable, a threat to pack order. But the truth is simpler, we were a threat to you, to every corrupt alpha who ruled through deception and fear. She turned to address the other 6 council members. How many of you knew what Dorian truly is? How many were complicit in his crimes and how many were simply blind? The female alpha with gray hair stood. I am Sana of the Riverlands. I have suspected Dorian for years but lacked proof. She looked at Rhiannon. If you can truly see truth, then show us. Show us all what he's done. Rhiannon moved toward Dorian, pulse pounding. This was the moment everything hinged on. If she could expose him, prove the corruption, the council would have no choice but to reform. If she failed, they'd all die here in this valley. She reached out with her truth-seeing gift, not to Dorian directly, his defenses were too strong, but to the space around him, to the memories that clung to this valley like old blood. And then she projected what she saw. Images flooded through every mind present. Dorian 70 years ago, younger but already cruel, leading hunts against moon-blessed families. Young wolves torn from their families. Elders executed without trial. And worse, rituals performed in darkness, consuming the essence of the dying to extend his own life. Decade after decade of hidden crimes. Wolves who disappeared, officially listed as rogues or casualties, but actually murdered to feed his hunger for immortality. And through it all, the slow corruption of his soul, the gradual transformation from ambitious alpha into something that barely qualified as wolf anymore. The projections ended, leaving stunned silence in their wake. Lies, Dorian screamed, but his voice had changed, taken on a quality that wasn't quite mortal. Illusions crafted by moon, blessed trickery. Enough, Theron said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. I have seen enough. The council recognizes. Dorian moved faster than anyone expected, faster than any 60-year-old should be capable of moving. He transformed mid-leap, but his wolf form was wrong, corrupted. Shadows writhed through his fur like living things, and his eyes burned with red fire instead of natural amber. He went straight for Rhiannon. Kael intercepted him, his massive black wolf, slamming into Dorian's corrupted form with bone-shattering force. They rolled across the amphitheater floor, snapping and clawing, 2 alphas, fighting for dominance. But Dorian was older, fueled by dark magic, sustained by a century of stolen life force. He threw Kael aside like a rag doll, the Alpha King hitting the stone wall with a sickening crack. Kay, Rhiannon screamed, running toward him. Dorian cut her off, his corrupted form looming over her, shadows spreading like oil across the ground. You should have stayed hidden, he growled, his voice layered with otherworldly harmonics. Should have accepted your place as broken, worthless, forgotten. Now you'll die like all the rest. He lunged, jaws wide, death incarnate, and Morgan stepped between them. The old woman's wolf form blazed with silver light, meeting Dorian's darkness with a brilliance that made everyone shield their eyes. When the 2 forces collided, the sound was like thunder, like mountains splitting, like the earth remembering how to roar. They fought with the fury of old enemies, with the weight of 65 years of grief and rage and survival behind every blow. Morgan was skilled, experienced, powered by righteous anger. But Dorian was augmented by dark magic, by stolen essences, by power that shouldn't exist in any natural wolf. He was winning. Rhiannon watched her grandmother being driven back, watched Dorian's shadows beginning to wrap around Morgan's light, beginning to squeeze and suffocate and consume. No, she whispered. Then louder, no. Nova, Astrid, and Zephyra moved to her side without conscious thought. 4 young women, 4 moon-blessed, who had only just found each other, who had trained together for mere weeks. The constellation formation, Nova said urgently. It's our only chance. They joined hands, forming a circle, and began to howl. Not separately, but in harmony, their voices weaving together into something greater than the sum of its parts. The moon responded even though it was daylight, its light focusing through them like a lens, like a weapon forged from hope and starlight, and the refusal to surrender. Silver fire erupted from their circle, washing across the amphitheater in waves that made the corrupted shadows recoil. Dorian screamed as the light touched him, as it burned through the dark magic that sustained him, revealing the truth beneath the monster. And Rhiannon saw it clearly now, the man Dorian had been before corruption took him. Young, ambitious, yes, but not yet evil. A wolf who wanted to protect his pack, who had been seduced by power so gradually that he'd never noticed the moment he crossed from protector to predator. She released the circle, stepping forward alone, her hand outstretched. I can see you, she said softly. Not the monster, the man you were, the wolf who wanted to make things better. That wolf is dead, Dorian snarled, but his voice shook. No, just buried, suffocated by everything you've done in his name. She moved closer, fearless now, because she understood. You were afraid of death, afraid of weakness, afraid of being forgotten. So you took and took and took until there was nothing left of who you were. She placed her hand on his corrupted wolf form and showed him the truth. Every murder, every stolen life, every moment he'd chosen power over mercy, immortality over honor. She made him see what he'd become, made him feel the weight of a century of crimes. And then she showed him something else, a path forward. Not redemption, some things couldn't be redeemed, but choice. The ability to stop, to surrender, to refuse to let the corruption spread any further. You can end this, she whispered. You can choose to stop being a monster, even if you can never be forgiven for what you've done. Dorian shifted back to human form, and for the first time in a century, he looked his true age. Ancient, exhausted, carrying the weight of too many years and too many sins. He dropped to his knees. I yield, he said, and his voice was broken. I surrender. I submit to judgment. The amphitheater erupted in chaos. Wolves who'd served Dorian didn't know whether to attack or flee. Council members shouted over each other, demanding explanations, order, clarity. And then a new voice cut through it all. Rhiannon, she turned to see her father pushing through the crowd, looking wild and desperate, and older than his 48 years. Aldrich Ashwood had ridden for 3 days straight when he'd heard about the council summons. Had brought 20 wolves with him, all that remained loyal to him after Rhiannon's departure. He saw the scene before him, his daughter standing over a surrendered alpha, his mother-in-law blazing with power, the council in disarray, and he made a choice. He shifted his brown wolf form, unremarkable compared to the moon-blessed, and positioned himself between Rhiannon and the hostile wolves who were beginning to advance. You want her, you go through me. He growled through the mental link that all shifted wolves shared. Other wolves joined him. Kael, recovering from his impact, limped to Rhiannon's side. Magnus and the Darkmoon warriors formed a protective circle. The other moon-blessed shifted back, ready to fight if needed. And slowly, reluctantly, wolves who'd served Dorian began to back down. Because even they could see the truth now. Even they understood that their alpha had been corrupted beyond redemption. Theron stood, raising his hand for silence. The council recognizes what has transpired here. Alpha Dorian is found guilty of crimes against wolfkind of dark magic, use of murder, and consumption of essence. He is stripped of rank and expelled from all territories. He turned to look at Rhiannon and the other Moonblessed. And we acknowledge the Moonblessed as legitimate, as bearers of ancient wisdom and power, as survivors of an unjust purge. Sana stepped forward. I propose a new structure. 7 regional alphas as before, but with 4 Moonblessed serving as arbiters and truth keepers. A council of 11, where power is shared and corruption can be exposed before it takes root. And representation from all designations, Rhiannon added, finding her voice. Not just alphas and moonblessed, but betas, deltas, gammas, and yes, omegas. True representation for all wolves. That would revolutionize pack structure, another alpha protested. Good, Rhiannon replied. The old structure created monsters like Dorian. Time for something new. The debate that followed was fierce and long. Not all alphas agreed, not all were ready for change. But enough were. Enough had seen what unchecked power could become, had witnessed the truth that Moonblessed could reveal. By sunset, the new council structure was ratified. 11 seats instead of 7. Power shared instead of hoarded. Truth valued instead of hidden. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even complete. The details would take months to work out. But it was a beginning. Dorian was led away in chains, heading for exile in the farthest territories where he could harm no one. He looked back once at Rhiannon, his eyes holding something that might have been gratitude beneath the weight of his crimes. She'd given him a choice, and he'd taken it. That would have to be enough. As the crowd dispersed, as wolves began the long journey back to their home territories, Aldrich approached his daughter. They stood facing each other, 2 people separated by 6 years of grief and guilt, trying to find their way back to being family. I failed you, Aldrich said simply. Failed your mother. Failed to protect you, to support you, to be the father you deserved. You were grieving, Rhiannon replied. You were drowning. I understand that now. Understanding doesn't erase the harm. He took a shaky breath. But I want to do better. Want to be worthy of being your father again. If you'll let me. She looked at him, this man who'd given her life, but then couldn't bear to look at her, who'd loved her mother enough to let her sacrifice herself, who'd carried guilt like stones in his pockets for 6 years. And she chose forgiveness. I'll let you, she said, and stepped into his embrace. They cried together there in the Whispering Valley, surrounded by wolves and witnesses and the ghosts of those who'd died so they could reach this moment. Morgan joined them, 3 generations linked by blood and loss and love that survived despite everything. Your mother would be proud, the old woman said, holding them both. So proud of you both. 1 year later, the new council met quarterly in the circular chamber built to house them, 11 voices instead of 7 decisions made through consensus rather than dominance. Rhiannon presided as first moon-blessed counselor, not queen, never queen, just someone who served. Nova managed the healers network. Zephyra coordinated resource sharing. Astrid warned of problems before they became catastrophes. 8 more moon-blessed had emerged, the youngest 16, the oldest 73. Together, they formed a force for justice that couldn't be corrupted or bought. Rhiannon stood in the council chamber, watching the sun set through windows, facing all directions, Kael's arms around her waist. Ready for tomorrow, he asked. Tomorrow. The formal marking ceremony that would complete their mate bond. They'd waited a full year building trust and partnership, proving their connection was choice as much as destiny. I've been ready for months, she admitted. I wanted you to be sure. Wanted to know you were choosing me. She turned in his arms. I chose you the first night. I choose you every day. And I'll choose you tomorrow and every day after that. The door burst open. 3 small wolves in pup form tumbled in. Ren 8, Finian 9, Bryn 7, orphans from the battle, now their children. We're supposed to be in bed. Ren giggled, shifting back. But Finian wanted to show you his shift. Kael inspected them seriously. Very good. But whose idea was it to sneak out? All 3 found the floor fascinating. Back to bed. Tomorrow's a big day. Will there be cake? Ren asked. Mountains of it, Rhiannon promised. She tucked each one in with the care her mother had once shown her. These children would grow up knowing they were loved, knowing the world could change when people were brave enough. In the corridor, Morgan waited. At 88, her grandmother showed no signs of slowing, spending her days teaching young moon-blessed their heritage. Your mother visited my dreams last night, Morgan said. Wanted me to tell you she's proud. Tears pricked Rhiannon's eyes. I wish she could be here tomorrow. She will be, in every choice you make, every kindness you show. Morgan cupped her face. You are her legacy, living proof that love survives anything. The marking ceremony took place at dawn under the full moon. Morgan stood as elder witness. Nova, Astrid, and Zephyra created a circle of light. Aldrich walked Rhiannon through. He'd become pack ambassador for Ashwood, implementing reforms honoring Freya's sacrifice through action. Kael waited at the center, Magnus beside him. I mark you as mine, Kael said. Not as possession, but as partnership. I mark you as mine, Rhiannon replied. Not in submission, but in equality. They shifted together, marking each other, and the mate bond snapped fully into place. It was coming home, finding the missing piece. Every moment of pain leading here. When they shifted back, celebration erupted. There was cake, dancing, joy that felt impossible after everything they'd survived. Later on the balcony overlooking Darkmoon, Kael's arms around her, Rhiannon watched their territory prepare for sleep. Below, Ren, Finian, and Bryn played despite bedtime. Morgan joined them, ancient laughter mixing with young joy. Aldrich and Iris, pregnant, now visiting with her mate, sat together. Nova, Astrid, Zephyra taught young moon-blessed about stars and heritage and power. This was family, not bound by blood alone, but by choice, shared struggle, the decision to love despite cost. The moon doesn't care how long you hid in darkness, Rhiannon said softly. When you finally step into the light, it welcomes you home. She'd hidden 21 years, believed herself broken for 3. Now she stood as proof it was never too late to bloom, to change, to become who you were meant to be. The rejected Omega had become a counselor. The defective wolf had become moon-blessed. The girl who believed she was nothing had learned she was everything. And most importantly, she'd learned strength came in many forms. Grandmother's quiet persistence, mother's sacrifice, fathers learning to do better, women lifting each other up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The council was still finding its footing. There would be resistance, setbacks, moments when progress felt impossible. But tonight she was simply Rhiannon. Mate, daughter, sister, mother, leader through service, not dominance. And that was enough. The moon hung full and bright, casting silver light across everything it touched. Rhiannon thought she could hear her mother's voice on the wind whispering love and pride. Some wolves bloom early, some bloom late. But every flower that blooms changes the garden forever. She had bloomed at 21 after years of believing it would never happen. And in blooming, she'd changed everything. The silver moon had risen and it would never set again.